House. So who is Steve Bannon? Who are Breitbart News? Well, Breitbart are a relatively new media organisation, conservative media organisation, founded by Andrew Breitbart. He's since passed away. He was replaced by Bannon as the top guy. What's their relationship to the far right? Well, speaking to Sarah Posner earlier this year, immediately following the Republican National Convention, Steve Bannon said that Breitbart News is, quote, the platform for the alt-right. Well, who are the alt-right? Well, Breitbart were kind enough to pen an article, again early this year, called An Establishment Conservative's Guide to the Alt-Right. In that article, they identify, amongst other things, the leading intellectuals of this movement, one of which includes one Richard Spencer. So let's rewind a bit here. Bannon is now Trump's pick. He's his number one guy, his right-hand man at the White House. He's coming from Breitbart News. What's Breitbart News? A platform for the alt-right. Who's one of the big thinkers of the alt-right? A guy called Richard Spencer. So let's go back to Spencer. What does this guy think? Well, he's said and done some pretty remarkable things. I think, again, he's a fascist, but you decide for yourself. Here's a quote from January 2013 in his column for the National Policy Institute. It concerns one Martin Luther King Jr., and I quote, Martin Luther King Jr., a fraud and degenerate in his life, has become the symbol and cynosure of white dispossession and the deconstruction of Occidental civilization. We must overcome. A month later, in February 2013, in the same place, in his column for the National Policy Institute, Spencer wrote, and I quote, immigration is a kind of proxy war, and maybe a last stand for white Americans, who are undergoing a painful recognition that, unless dramatic action is taken, their grandchildren will live in a country that is alien and hostile. So I hear what you're saying. You're going, well, those two quotes, okay, the guy's a white supremacist, maybe a Tommy Robinson, but not a fascist. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. Richard Spencer, quote, in Vice 2013, you will not believe this. Our dream is a new society, an ethno-state that would be a gathering point for all Europeans. It would be a new society based on very different ideals than, say, the Declaration of Independence. So to remind you, Bannon, Breitbart, they are the platform for the alt-right. They've identified themselves, Richard Spencer, as a key intellectual for the alt-right. Okay? Spencer is on record as saying he's an ethno-nationalist. He wants a country for people of European, i.e. white origin, and it would have a constitution different to the Declaration of Independence, i.e. it wouldn't really call for universal equality. So that's Richard Spencer. Back to Steve Bannon. By the way, I don't think there's much difference between their two politics. I think one of them's better at keeping his mouth shut, masking his politics slightly better. Nonetheless, Bannon is on record as saying he thinks that there is an inevitable global holy war, right? Okay, this is not Osama bin Laden. This is the chief strategist of the next president of the United States between the West and between Islam. Furthermore, he believes that the Judeo-Christian West, as he calls it, has been weakened by the cult of secularism, and that it might not have sufficient strength in this impending war because of secularism, because of Judaism, because of things like feminism, multiculturalism, that we might not be able to survive this global conflict with Islam that's on the horizon in the 21st century. This is millenarian claptrap. This is complete nonsense. It's unhinged. No other word for it. And yet this gentleman is the right-hand man for the president-elect. If you want to hear Bannon's politics in his own words, look, the guy used to do a podcast for Breitbart News Daily News, with Sirius FM. Go check it out. And he used to have racists and misogynists and sexists and Islamophobes on week after week, you know?
Give you a chance to respond to that Steve Bannon oversaw Cambridge Analytica's collection of Facebook data, according to the former employee, the whistleblower, who said that Bannon, who sat on the board of that company, was sort of overseeing a lot of their actions, that he oversaw and sort of gave the green light to this big kind of data scraping that Cambridge Analytica did that has them in trouble with UK regulators.
I mean, I can't speak to the kind of direct line of control when it came to harvesting that Facebook data, obviously. But, you know, Steve Bannon was, part of the reason why Steve Bannon was interested in Cambridge Analytica was because of the kinds of models that they were testing, the kind of psychographic models that they were testing. The only way to ensure that they might be effective and to ensure that they were able to test messaging, which we know that they were doing early on too, you know, things like drain the swamp. The only way to really decide whether or not that messaging could be effective was if they had a large pool of data to work with. So certainly you could imagine there would have been the desire for that data to be available. Now, Steve Bannon, we know, was in talks with Wiley in 2013. By 2014, Robert Mercer was involved, backing it. By that point, Steve Bannon's a vice president of Cambridge Analytica. So certainly, he is a presence within the new entity, the new US entity, Cambridge Analytica, at the time that Wiley is discussing.
Hey there. But send a message to Brussels. I will be spending, 80% of my time in Europe in preparation for the European parliamentary elections with my partners in Belgium. We're starting this group called the Movement.
The movement is a club where all populist leaders and movements could gather, speak to each other, support each other when necessary, establish contact.
What is Steve Bannon's role? What is Steve Bannon's role?